for what it's worth, I've gone on for years about the importance of thinking about the long term in relation to, and I don't want to be confronted by my grandchild saying, why didn't you do something? So clearly, now it makes it even more obvious,
There are royal moments that arrive without fanfare. No coronets, no balcony waves, just a child's hand offering a medal beneath the summer sun. On July 13th, 25, as Wimbledon prepared for its final match, the world paused for something quieter, but no less historic. Princess Charlotte, only 10 years old, stepped forward onto center court, not as a spectator or guest, but as Wimbledon's first ever junior patron ambassador, a role created especially for her and bestowed not by the tournament, but by her grandfather, King Charles. It was a decision made in quiet reflection, far from the public eye. Months into his cancer treatments, the king, who once spoke of fearing questions from his grandchildren about whether he had done enough, found an answer not in policy but in legacy. He entrusted Charlotte with a role that was small in scale but immense in meaning: to represent youth, to inspire, and to carry forward a thread of royal tradition in a world that is always changing. This was not simply a ceremonial gesture, it was a passing of purpose, an act of faith between generations. In a polka-dot dress and gentle smile, Charlotte stood as the embodiment of that trust. As she handed out junior player awards and spoke softly to her peers, something subtle but powerful took place. A new chapter in royal life began. And not with thunder, but with grace. In the final chapters of a reign, some monarchs issue proclamations, others commission portraits. King Charles, however, chose something far more intimate. As the months passed following his diagnosis in early 2024, the king withdrew from the public eye, not out of weakness, but contemplation. Between treatments and brief public duties, he returned to the quiet corridors of Clarence House and Sandringham, where family photos lined the mantel and the sound of grandchildren echoed through the halls. Among them, Charlotte, curious, observant, gentle in manner, but firm in spirit. She reminded him, many said, of Princess Elizabeth as a child, not in likeness, but in presence. It was during these quieter days that the idea took shape. Wimbledon had long been a beloved tradition in the royal family. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had served as its official patron since 2016. But the king saw in it more than just a sporting event. He saw a moment, a stage, where tradition could meet transition. From his study, he proposed something never done before, a new role created specifically for Charlotte. Not as a mascot or symbolic figure, but as a junior patron ambassador for youth engagement, someone who would stand alongside young athletes, encourage their dreams, and represent the monarchy not through formality, but sincerity. He didn't want to wait until it was too late, one palace aide later confided. This wasn't a succession plan. It was a gesture of love, one that only a grandfather could make. By entrusting Charlotte with this quiet responsibility, Charles was saying something louder than any royal address, that the future would not be built only by heirs, but by hearts. That service could begin not with age, but with intention. And that sometimes the most lasting legacies begin with the smallest hands. Even as illness kept him in the background, King Charles was still guiding the future. With this quiet gesture, a single role entrusted to his granddaughter, he began a new chapter in royal life. Not for show and not for himself, but for Charlotte. She didn't arrive on center court with the stride of someone rehearsed in public life. There was no trace of performance in her posture, no sign of calculation in her smile. Charlotte stood in that moment as she is, a child but one raised with the quiet knowledge that some lives are watched more closely than others. Her journey to that stage wasn't measured in years, but in small, almost invisible steps. In 23, she had joined her mother for a quiet girls' day at Wimbledon, timid, wide-eyed, uncertain where to look when the cameras turned. A year later, she returned, more confident, her eyes no longer searching for reassurance, but soaking in the rhythm of the crowd, the thrill of the match. But even then, she was still a spectator. This summer was different. Dressed simply, yet with unmistakable care, Charlotte wasn't stepping into a legacy. She was stepping into herself. As the new junior patron ambassador, she wasn't standing in for anyone. She was standing as herself. Her voice, though soft, carried weight. She greeted junior players not as someone above them, but as someone among them. She handed out awards with genuine curiosity, listened closely to each young athlete's story, and smiled with a sincerity that made the cameras irrelevant. And behind all that, behind the ceremony, the title, the crowd, was something more enduring. Poise. Not the trained kind, the earned kind. Charlotte didn't need to recite a speech or wave from a balcony to be noticed. She simply needed to be present. In that, she mirrored the women in her lineage, her great-grandmother's restraint, her mother's empathy, and yet she brought her own shape to the moment. There was no mimicry. This was the beginning of something personal. Where other royal debuts had been choreographed, Charlotte's felt quietly lived, as if the role had waited patiently for her to grow into it rather than being forced upon her. And maybe that's what made it so moving. She wasn't pretending to be older. She wasn't trying to be regal. She was simply Charlotte, steady, kind, and ready in her own way. Before the cameras found Charlotte, they often found her mother. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has long been known for her poise, a quality so constant it risks being mistaken for simplicity. But behind that calm exterior lies something far more formidable: intention. And nowhere was that more visible than in the way she stood by Charlotte's side at Wimbledon 2025, present but not overshadowing, supportive but never directing. This was not her moment. But it had been shaped, quietly by her hands. Since her cancer diagnosis was made public in 2024, Catherine had stepped back from many public duties. Her return to Wimbledon that summer was both symbolic and deeply personal, not just for tradition's sake, but for her daughters. Where others might have watched from afar, she chose to be near, to witness, to support, and when necessary, to step aside. During the youth ceremony, she stood just a few steps behind Charlotte, not interfering, not correcting, only offering a quiet glance of encouragement, a small nod when words weren't needed. In one moment, caught by the cameras but understood only by mothers, Charlotte looked up, and Catherine was already smiling. Their connection has never been theatrical. It is built on trust, rehearsed in kitchens and car rides, in whispered bedtime reminders and gentle hairbrush strokes before events like this one. The way Charlotte carried herself that day did not come from nowhere. It came from years of being taught that dignity isn't loud and strength doesn't always announce itself. Even their outfits spoke the same language. Charlotte's polka dot dress echoed her mother's own Wimbledon attire from years past. Not an imitation, but a conversation between generations. Her light pink nail polish, barely there, broke no royal rules but added a softness, a child's signature in a grown-up space. And through it all, Catherine was there, not to guide her daughter's steps, but to let her find rhythm in her own. Some mothers teach through words. Catherine teaches through presence. She knew when to lean in and when to let go. And at Wimbledon 2025, she did both, gracefully. If Charlotte stood in the light that day, she didn't stand alone. From the royal box, a quiet constellation of support surrounded her. Prince William watched with eyes that didn't search for cameras, but for his daughter. There was no grand applause, no visible emotion, only the kind of stillness that speaks volumes. At one point, as Charlotte handed an award to a young player, William's shoulders lifted just slightly. A father's breath held, then released. Prince George sat beside him, a brother close in age but already accustomed to the subtle choreography of royal life. He clapped with the pride of a sibling who understood the moment was not his but felt the victory all the same. Not the victory of attention, the victory of becoming. And though he wasn't present in person, Prince Louis had his own role to play. Back home, according to palace aides, he watched the broadcast with restless excitement, reportedly cheering when Charlotte's name was mentioned and jumping when she smiled at the crowd. Later that evening, she returned with a signed tennis ball, a small gesture between siblings, but a reminder that behind the formality, this was still a family. Even extended figures of monarchy took notice. King Felipe VI of Spain, seated not far from the Waleses, greeted Charlotte with warm respect after the ceremony. There was no diplomatic protocol, no forced symbolism. Just a simple handshake between royals, old and new, and a recognition that history had quietly shifted. Later, after the trophies had been presented and the cameras turned elsewhere, William and Catherine shared a moment of stillness. No words were recorded, no headlines written, but those who saw it said the look they exchanged carried everything: pride, relief, and something deeper, the realization that a new rhythm had begun within their family. Not one orchestrated by obligation, but by choice. Sometimes in royal life, meaning is found not in speeches, but in glances. And on that summer afternoon, the House of Windsor spoke in chants and was understood. It wasn't the kind of moment headlines usually chase. No dramatic gestures, no controversies, no declarations. And yet, in the hours after Charlotte's quiet appearance at Wimbledon, something unexpected happened, not in the palace, but in the homes of strangers. Across the United Kingdom, parents paused mid-breakfast, watching replays of the youth ceremony on muted television screens. Children, still in summer pajamas, asked who she was. And all over social media, the conversation changed. Not towards scandal or speculation, but towards softness, an instinct to feel something rather than judge it. Hashtags began to rise, not by force of PR, but through genuine connection. Hashtag Princess Charlotte Wimbledon, hashtag Royal Resilience, and hashtag A New Kind of Royal began appearing beneath videos, photos, and quiet reflections. One tweet, shared thousands of times, read simply, "She didn't speak for long, but I felt like I knew what she meant." It wasn't just Britain that felt the shift. In Spain, where King Felipe had been present that day, the press called Charlotte's debut "una nueva página silenciosa en la monarquía británica," a new silent page in the British monarchy. In Canada, family columnists reflected on the intergenerational bond between King Charles and his granddaughter. In Japan, a headline described her as "a royal without pretense." And in the United States, where public affection for the monarchy has often been measured with skepticism, the moment landed differently. "We may not need a queen," one American mother posted, "but we do need more girls like her." Perhaps it was because Charlotte didn't perform. She simply participated. She represented something human, not by design, but by being allowed to grow. At the All England Club, officials reported a quiet surge in inquiries about youth tennis programs just days after the event. Parents cited the broadcast directly. Teachers played her short remarks in assemblies, not to talk about royalty, but to talk about courage. Courage that didn't shout, courage that stood still, smiled gently, and showed up. For all its history, the British monarchy rarely announces change. It absorbs it, gently, and almost imperceptibly. That afternoon at Wimbledon wasn't just a personal moment between a grandfather and his granddaughter. It was also something more deliberate. A move, not in the political sense, but in the quiet choreography of an institution that knows its survival depends on meaning, not just ceremony. Observers have long noted that King Charles envisions a more focused, streamlined monarchy, one grounded in relevance, not just heritage. But his approach, unlike past generations, doesn't rely on declarations. Instead, it leans into human connection, into symbolism that doesn't demand to be explained. Charlotte's new role may appear modest on the surface, but within it lies something profoundly strategic, a redirection of public attention toward the next generation, not by obligation, but by invitation. The monarchy isn't handing down titles, it's handing down trust, and that trust begins with youth. Wimbledon, a tournament steeped in royal association, became the perfect platform for that message. Not Buckingham Palace, not a balcony, but a place where ordinary people gather, where a little girl handing out medals feels less like protocol and more like promise. Some critics might question the purpose of such roles, but purpose in the modern monarchy is not found in power. It's found in presence. By introducing Charlotte through service, not spectacle, the royal family shifted the narrative. She wasn't positioned as a future queen or figurehead. She was simply allowed to be a child stepping into something meaningful, not heavy with expectation, but light with possibility. It's a subtle recalibration, one that replaces distance with recognition, one that suggests the monarchy's relevance will not be maintained by grand gestures, but by gentle ones that linger. A smile, a handshake, a girl on a summer court. This wasn't just about preserving tradition. It was about shaping a new one where feeling matters as much as formality. No one knows where a child's story will go, not even when that child is royal. Charlotte's role at Wimbledon was not a forecast. It was a beginning, gentle, unassuming, and free from the weight of obligation. And perhaps that's what made it so powerful. There was no press release outlining her next steps, no formal calendar of appearances to follow, just the simple fact that she had stood, spoken, and been seen, not as a future monarch, but as herself. And yet, for those paying close attention, something had shifted. Those who witnessed her ease among the junior players, the natural way she listened and responded, the softness in her voice that didn't shrink from attention, saw not a performance, but potential. Not as destiny prescribed, but as something gradually forming, choice by choice. She may return to Wimbledon in future years, or she may not. She may grow into other roles, perhaps in education, youth engagement, or environmental causes quietly aligned with her grandfather's legacy. But none of this is fixed, and that too feels new. In a world where children grow up faster, where public figures are often polished beyond recognition, Charlotte's presence felt refreshingly unforced. Her youth wasn't masked, it was embraced. That mattered, because the girls and boys watching her didn't see someone perfect. They saw someone present. There's power in that. Already, some schools have used her moment at Wimbledon as a way to talk about leadership, not in the form of command, but connection. Teachers have asked, what does it mean to show up for others? What does kindness in a public space look like? And in that way, Charlotte's gesture became more than ceremonial. It became instructional. This freedom she's given to step forward gently, to serve without being summoned, isn't just modern parenting. It's a reflection of a monarchy that has begun to evolve from command to invitation. For generations, royal children were raised in the shadow of expectation. Their paths were mapped before their first public words. But Charlotte, it seems, is being raised with more room to explore, to retreat, to decide. This freedom is not accidental. It reflects a deeper shift in the monarchy itself, one that values presence over prescription, one that accepts that service, to be meaningful, must also be authentic. And so, what Charlotte becomes may matter less than how she becomes it. Whether her future is public or private, ceremonial or personal, One thing has already been made clear. She carries something quietly bright, and the world, gently, patiently, is watching it unfold. As the sun dipped lower over center court, the crowd began to thin, the applause long faded into murmurs, and the cameras slowly turned away. But in one quiet corner near the players' entrance, a small moment lingered. Too subtle for headlines, too honest for scripting. Charlotte, medal case in hand, paused near the tunnel. The day was done. Her first public role complete. And yet, she didn't rush. Instead, she turned, just briefly, to look back at the court. Not to wave, not to pose, just to take it in. Behind her, Catherine adjusted the edge of her daughter's sleeve gently, like she had done since childhood. A touch that meant, "You did well." Prince William stood nearby, his voice low, his eyes proud. George and Louis waited in the car, already chattering about ice cream. Then a phone buzzed. It was a video call. From the king. Though not present, he had watched everything, and when Charlotte answered, his voice, faint with age and treatment, carried something unmistakable. There were no royal titles exchanged, no formality, just a grandfather's smile and a granddaughter's shy grin. A few words, a soft, "Thank you," a quiet, "I'm proud of you," and that was enough. These are not the moments carved in stone. They will not be archived in royal libraries, but they endure, in memory, in meaning, and in the hearts of those who saw them. Because what unfolded that day at Wimbledon was not just a ceremonial debut. It was a passing of something far more precious than a role, the assurance that tradition can live gently and that the future, though uncertain, is already learning how to walk with grace. Legacy is often imagined in grand terms, etched into marble, spoken from balconies, passed down through power. But in truth, most legacies begin the way Charlotte's did, with a moment so small it might have been missed had we not been paying attention. One child, one role, one summer day on a tennis court. But what lingered was not the ceremony, it was the sincerity. The trust of a grandfather who knew that his time was no longer infinite, and the quiet willingness of a granddaughter to take a first step, not knowing where it might lead. There is something profoundly modern, and yet timeless, in the way this moment unfolded. It was not orchestrated to impress. It did not ask to be remembered, but it will be. Not because of titles or speeches, but because it reminded us that the essence of continuity is not about holding on. It's about letting go, gently. This is the heart of legacy, not control but courage, not perfection but participation. What Charlotte received at Wimbledon was not a spotlight. It was an invitation. To listen, to observe, to show up, not because she was told to, but because she chose to. And in that choice, a new kind of royalty began to take shape. One that doesn't speak from above, but walks beside. That is how tradition survives, not by staying the same, but by becoming meaningful to those who inherit it. So when we speak of legacy, perhaps we need fewer statues and more small gestures, fewer declarations and more soft beginnings. Because sometimes a true royal chapter isn't written in history books. It begins with a child turning back toward a court, holding a medal, and smiling into the future.